When this man said this, he immediately made the poor man dangerous. He said, to get rich, you must do things in a certain way. And in order to do things in a certain way, you must acquire the ability to think in a certain way. Why? Because the way that man goes about doing things is a direct result of the way he thinks about things. To do what you want to do, you must be able to think what you want to think. To think what you want to think, you must think truth regardless of appearance. Now, all that in a nutshell is basically saying, okay, to get rich, you got to do things in a certain way. In order to do things in a certain way, you got to be able to think in a certain way. So your thoughts impact the way that you act, right? So in order to impact your thoughts, you must think the truth regardless of appearance. That's what he says. To think truth regardless of appearance will give you the ability to think what you want to think. And if you can think what you want to think, you can act in a certain way because your thoughts impact your actions. This is huge. Now it gets deeper because he says that every man has the inherent power to think what he wants to think, but it requires more work to do so than it does to think the thoughts suggested by appearance. Thoughts suggested by appearance is easy. What do he mean by that? If you're wealthy, you're surrounded by wealth. You're surrounded by all the things you can use and enjoy, give, and all these things. It's easy to think those thoughts because it falls into alignment of who you are, why you was created, to use and enjoy all these things. But he says to think thoughts regardless of appearance is laborious. He said that this requires more work, it is expenditure of more power and work than any other work called upon man. Now here's where it gets really juicy. He says every appearance in the visible world tends to produce a corresponding form to the mind which observes it. This is the invisible chains that has bound the poor man down, and he has no idea what it is. Now he does, if he heard this or if he read this man's teachings. So let me say that again. Every appearance in the visible world tends to produce a corresponding form in the mind that observes it. So your senses, your eyes have failed many men, especially men in poverty, because he does not know. He underestimates the mind and the eyes of what it sustains and observes, because he underestimates that his mind produces these forms, and this is what he's constantly attracting in his life. When he's in poverty and he looks at poverty and vacant houses, all he sees is poorness and salvagery and all these other different negative and bad things. This is the stuff that's going to take form because this is where his attention lies. He goes deeper. He goes deeper, y'all. He says, there's no labor that will shrink more people than that of which sustained consecutive thought. This is the things that you're fixated on. So if you're around all of this, of course you're looking at all this. We now know that what you gaze upon, the appearance in the visible world, it produces a form, the image of what you pay attention to. Now he says this is the hardest work in the world, which is that of sustained consecutive thought. This is the power, because if you know this, you know that there's a high value on your attention. There's a high value on what you place your eyes on and observe. And this is why I feel like his teachings of doing things in a certain way and thinking a certain way is huge. It's evident right here in front of our face. It's no different than we see the devil and everything as an external thing. When I look at this and the book of Job's and how he was tested and how God allowed him to be tested, this is no different than that. I'm like, okay, if man is built to increase and be more, do more, and all these things, why does the mind accept that of which is, will harm him? And that's what I'm thinking the senses of, because it doesn't discriminate what form it's going to create and bring to you. He didn't say every appearance in the visible world tend to produce a corresponding form, positive form, or good form, wealthy form. He says form only. That means anything you gaze upon is going to produce that. If you constantly hold that thought, if you constantly observing that thing, it's going to create that thing, and that's what you're going to attract. So all in all, the biggest thing out of this is the poor man. It becomes dangerous when he know to think truth regardless of his appearance. It is the hardest work in the world, of course, and we all know this. When your situation, when you feel misplaced, it's hard for you to see the best out of anything. You're in it. You're surrounded by it. This is the hardest work. It's the hardest work to be in a job you know is not meant for you, is not going to provide the lifestyle you want and desire. It's the hardest work in the world to be grateful for that job. Oftentimes, to be grateful for that business. If it's dry, running you dry. It's the hardest work in the world, but it's power in acquiring that to keep your mind fixated on the truth. There's power in that. There's extreme power. There's mastery in that. And then the last thing, once we all realize there's a certain resource that's available to everyone wealthy, everyone that's middle class, and sure enough, the poor. Oftentimes, the poor man feel like there's no resources for him to rise up out of his condition. There's resources. When I say resources, keep watching. There's resources that's available to every man and woman. But again, you already know it has to be done in a certain way. You got to think in a certain way. This is the only way you have access to it. It is what it is. I'm gonna keep it coming.